All right, welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the NIA boys here. I'm going to intro you in a second because we got to kick it off with Meme of the Week. It's our boy, Dr. Parik Patel. Definitely a real person, drpatel.eth. And this had me howling, boys. It said, and it's a picture of the head of state of India, Mr. Modi, hugging Putin. And the caption is, can't keep Gujaratis away from a discount. And bro, this had me howling so much. Because,
what's the headline? India's going to buy discounted Russian oil, right?
Exactly, yeah. So Russia is offering oil at a heavy discount. We'll be happy to take that. India looks to bail out Putin, etc., etc.
Okay, Bilal, why is this so funny? As a Pakistani Brit, can you explain to us the humor involved with this? Because it's a dark joke. It's a very dark joke.
Out of the three of us, I was the only one who can present that. Yeah, because we don't want to get cancelled or demonetized before we monetize, as we said. But yeah, so obviously we've all seen Russell Peters, Indians versus Chinese people doing business. That's a classic joke. Yeah. But specifically within the brown community, there's a group of people called Gujaratis who are from Gujarat, and they the joke is that they're like cheap or whatever, right? So,
is that southwestern India? Is this the right?
I don't even know what part of India it is, but it's just.
I think it's in the south, but they are known to be very good at business. Is this
completely?
Correct?
Yeah, and in the UK, specifically, you get a lot of like the store owners are Gujarati and stuff like that. I grew up with a lot of Gujarati friends. One of them's listening right now, Hitesh Patel. I sent this to after. And but it's the bigger story obviously is India is buying up some of that nice cheap oil that is going around right now.
Because it's a good business opportunity.
I mean, 100%. And then to be fair, I did get a response saying Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, is also trying to get his hands on the good stuff. So anyway, let's get straight into what we're talking about this week, boys. There's a lot going on. We got Yuga Labs buying Punks and Meebits. We're going to get our very own Jack's take on that. He's Mr. NFT, so we're going to talk a little bit about the implications of that and what it might mean for the space. Then I'm going to walk you guys through what's going on in the soccer world. Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea, has been sanctioned by the UK, and we're going to talk about what's happening there, specifically a bit about his shady past, the impact it's had on football as a whole, and then this kind of wider idea of sports washing. Then Trung is going to talk through AMC buying a gold mine. I said just before the show started, you couldn't write a better NIA headline, right? The meme stock buying a gold mine is incredible. And we'll see if we get any more time after that. But let's just kick it off with Yuga Labs, boys, because this is very much within the NIA core demographic of meme stocks and NFT world. So what happened here? And who are Yuga Labs for people who don't know?
So Yuga Labs is the company behind the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Must have been incorporated almost a year ago to the day, right? And then this headline, Yuga Labs acquires CryptoPunks and Meebits and gives commercial rights to the community. That's the headline that they wrote to announce the fact that they bought the IP. So they bought the two collections and the rights to those collections from a company called Lava Labs, run by two dudes. That's not the entirety of their work, but Punk's probably the most culturally recognized piece of work that they've produced. And we'll drop a link to this, but Yuga Labs wrote a blog post about the acquisition and talked a little bit about their intentions. And broadly speaking, it was, we acquired the IP. The first thing we're going to do is transfer or, give commercial usage rights to the owners of these tokens within the CryptoPunk and Meebits communities. So CryptoPunks is a 10,000 avatar project, very similar to the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I think they actually referenced it as their inspiration, and pretty much every 10,000 edition profile picture project is inspired by the CryptoPunks. And then Meebits was a secondary project that Lava Labs launched. They actually gave, there's 20,000 of those, and 10,000 of them were free, given to owners of CryptoPunks, so free to claim these Meebits. And I guess the community has reacted to this in different ways, like depending on what side of the commercial rights debate you sit on, art versus brand versus business. I think broad strokes, the consensus is, well, obviously depends who you ask, but the assignment of commercial rights to the owners of the tokens is a meaningful step forward, right? If you own this thing, but you're very limited in what you can do with it. What do you actually own? That's like, what is art? And all of those debates go into that. And also the Bored Ape approach has been much more almost like a startup, right? In the way that they've been like aggressively building things. They hired a guy called Guy Oseary. I think we talked about that briefly at one point, but this guy's like a Hollywood agent. And I think, tapping into the networks of people that have influence and, getting them to buy up and display these things has like quickly accelerated the adoption of of this profile picture trend at like the highest levels of celebrity. And it says in this blog post that he was actually responsible for like suggesting this deal or making this deal go through. So the Matt and John, the guys that built Lava Labs, I don't think their core competency is like negotiating partnerships, doing press, PR, stunts, all of that stuff. They just want to make art. These guys actually also responsible for the little Android character. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Wait, like Google's Android?
Yeah, they designed. They made that? They designed that little half circle head thing.
Sick. I didn't know that.
So Bilal, come on, bro. That's your hood right there.
Yeah, so they're like in it for the art, I would say, right? They have a couple other collections, generative collections, Autoglyphs, another famous one. And it seems like they, over time, like with the Bored Ape collection kind of catching up to punks in terms of market cap, there's all this pressure coming from the community. Like, what are you going to do to, accelerate the adoption of these things, or how are you going to make them more attractive? And the kind of opposing opinions on the community side, one is like, yeah, do the same thing. And the other is like, no, this is just, these are historical digital artifacts, art pieces. Like, you don't need to add all of that stuff in here. And like, kind of, there's a purity to it as it stands. And the details of the deal have not been made public. I heard a number 350 million somewhere. To me, it sounds wrong to me, but it sounds low, because they also acquired a bunch of assets in the process. So 423 CryptoPunks and 1,700 Meebits. I think the value of those alone at market price would exceed that by...
It's already like $500 million right there. Right?
Yeah. So I have no idea what the number was. And Yuga Labs has said that they have no immediate plans for it other than returning, or granting, I should say, commercial rights to the people that own the tokens. And then that debate just becomes stuff that we've talked about on this podcast for a really long time, which is how effective is that? How much value can be created by a community? And I will say one thing, since the original thesis that we put out, the decentralized Disney idea, a year in, there are still only a handful of examples of people that have really executed something recognizable and have genuinely created like additional value beyond the collection itself. So I think the cynical argument is more to do with like any meaningful copyright exchange or any meaningful like copyright venture that uses the IP is going to have to be negotiated at the brand level, or like with the founders, with the people that are running the entire business. So remains to be seen, but a lot of people welcome the move, right? It's like, this is a better situation, for the community than having no ability to use these things in whichever way you want to.
Wait, Jack, in a previous episode, you talked about, is funks related to how punks did not allow for commercial usage of their PFPs profile?
Yeah, so they issued a bunch of DMCAs. Like that's a big, like Lava Labs, the guys who created CryptoPunks have went through this. There was this period of time where they were just constantly issuing DMCAs for their copyright being used incorrectly.
Were people taking them down?
On some exchanges, yeah. So they would issue DMCA complaints to OpenSea or to Foundation, whoever that was hosting the work. And then Funks, as an example, their collection got removed from OpenSea. So now they have their own decentralized marketplace that, short of, I don't know, AWS taking it down, I'm not sure there's much anybody can do. So yeah, that's another interesting thing. All of these derivative projects that have existed off the back of punks over time. I don't know if this actually changes the value of any of those things. But there's been a few. You hold all
three, right? You hold Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, and Funks.
And Meebits.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. And Meebits, the whole.
Yeah.
The full
so
deal.
Jack, for your retirement portfolio and your family's future generational wealth, is this move positive in the end?
I think you have to bet on the guys that created the most amount of value in the shortest amount of time. Okay. I would say yes. I think my thesis remains the same though, as how much room do the individual assets have to go up from here? How big is the market of people that have that amount of disposable capital, income, whatever you want to call it, versus does the next stage need to be, company X buys character Y, right? What's the next market to take it to the next level? And then does it retain its cultural relevance over time? I think maybe there's a good discussion to be had from a traditional startup and business acquisition strategy perspective, where they got so well capitalized in such a short amount of time that they can literally take their competition off the market, swallow up the OG competitor, and then have, even if they do nothing, they're kind of protecting their position in the market just by having the ability to, control that collection. So I think incredibly savvy move from that perspective too. Yeah. Pretty amazing. And I think it will set a precedent for acquisitions in this space, the buying of IP, brands coming up and gobbling up these things that already have network effects and might be adjacent to what you're already doing. There's some rumors going around that Disney is looking at buying a PFP collection right now. We don't know what that is. If I had to guess, I think have you seen the doodles? Have you seen those? They're cartoony looking things. If I had to guess, I'd be that, just from an aesthetic and vibe perspective. They're a lot softer. So maybe that's it. But to be completely honest, ever since our bear market episode, I haven't been as degenerately investing my time in this stuff. I'm not spending 50 hours a week looking in Discords anymore, so I could be way off on that one.
Was it the in-person event, Jack? Was it from there?
In New York?
It was no. Well, I think it was tailed off from them. But then when we talked about the, the hyper speculation stuff that we talked about before, that my time has been invested a little differently in the last few months, just focusing on making my own stuff, I suppose,
to creating stuff. Yeah.
Well,
indeed.
I had a couple points here from Cosmo de Medici, the pseudonymous. I still can't say that word. What is pseudonymous? Pseudonymous. Listen, his profile picture is an NFT, and nobody knows who he is, but he's a great. The account is widely followed. Big NFT investor. He had a thread on this acquisition. So a couple points I wanted to pull on. Jack mentioned one of them was how well capitalized Yuga Labs is. So Yuga Labs is the Bored Ape creator. So they got funded. I think they raised a couple $100 million at a $4 billion valuation. That ballpark. Andreessen Horowitz, not surprisingly, led that, I believe. But Cosmo brought up a great point that, Jack, you brought up just now, is the idea of a well-capitalized player in a market gobbling up an OG. Let's talk creative market. The example he brought up specifically is Louis Vuitton buying Christian Dior. Now, if you know, well, actually, Louis Vuitton didn't buy Christian Dior. It was the other way around. But as we discussed many episodes back, the story behind Bernard Arnault, the third richest person in the world, the majority owner of LVMH.
Yeah. Old matey is what?
Wait, what's up?
What Jack referred to? He asked, who's old matey who owns that fashion brand?
Who's the old matey? The old matey is the third richest guy in the world. I'm probably saying his name wrong too. But so that story was he had a large pot of money coming from a construction manufacturing family, goes out and buys Christian Dior, and then turns Christian Dior around. And Christian Dior is a legacy fashion brand, right? And then Christian Dior goes around a couple of years later. This all starts in the mid to late 80s, and buys LVMH. So this is one of those situations, right? And I think the larger point is you have a steward now. Like, why is LVMH so valuable? As we talked about, it's a $300 and $400 billion company. They are a steward of brands, right? And the Yuga Labs becoming a steward, as Jack alluded to, they seem to be much more commercially minded, right? They have that gentleman, the Hollywood agent that kind of probably runs a lot of their partnerships and strategy now. They're thinking about, how do we increase the value of this brand? I mean, Jack was like, we have videos from last April and May of Jack first mentioning Bored Ape, right? And like, we could pull clips of us being like, oh, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. And then a year later, literally a year later, they built this multi-billion-dollar creative asset that just swallowed up the OG. I think that's such a great point, right? Like, CryptoPunks are the OG for this NFT asset class. I think Cosmo referred to it as the Bitcoin of NFTs. It's like the first and the ones that will always have the Lindy with it. But because of the commercial mindedness of Yuga, they'll be able to capture that and hopefully for Jack's bags, increase the value of everything. Now Cosmo brought up two other points I wanted to talk about. Because Jack, you said, like, how much more can these go, right, from this point? It's like, how much more valuable can these things get? They're quite valuable. So he looked at the entire portfolio. He says between Bored Ape, crypto, Meebits, autoglyphs, and like mutants, the Bored Ape mutants. So there's like 60,000 PFPs across that asset now. His instinct is that that's still like not a lot. He's saying that that's still pretty scarce of a resource, which fair enough. If we believe the crypto economy will become on board 2-3 billion people, and you only have 60,000 of these assets, I get that. The other point he brought up, which is super interesting, was, and I love Jack's point on this because you mentioned in the past, is how much of an earthquake the flippening was when Bored Ape became bigger than CryptoPunks, when the floor price of a Bored Ape became bigger than the floor price of a crypto. So his position was that it completely changed the NFT industry, because before that, the idea of, hey, 2017 OG, that would be the ultimate trump card.
That's what the premium was, right?
Yeah, the premium was 2017 trump card. But then when Bored Ape flipped it, it went from, oh, wait, the premium is no longer this thing that everybody thought was the trump card in this industry. It turns out if you manage your PFP collection well and you play the cards right strategically, you can create a greater asset than the Bitcoin of NFTs. And that led to this, I don't know what month it happened, Jack, you'll know, but he said that afterwards, it was just a race of new NFT projects, because what everybody thought was the main criteria for what made NFTs valuable, the lindiness, the old school, the OG-ness, just went right out the window. I'd love you to opine on that.
Yeah, that's a good, you articulated that really well. I think the idea that there's only room in people's heads for a certain number of like top tier things in a category is a really interesting way to think about this too. Like in the watch world, let's say, right? If you would say, what are the top 5 luxury watch brands in the world? Most people would come and give you the same 3, 4, 5 every time. And I think Rollies, that's like, the AP, the whatever. And the idea that you value those based on when they were founded is like, if you think about being at the inception of a category, you really overweight or overvalue certain criteria based on your proximity to the criteria at the time, right? But what really matters is how much of a cultural impact they can have over a significant period of time. And it is like a 10D chess move to swallow up the only real like competitor you have for the person who is like the high net worth individual. It's like, which signal do I pick? Right.
Yeah.
And the only reason you would pick the punk over the Bored Ape is because you want to signal more like OG crypto status. Right. But now that is even out of the window. Like you're buying into Yuga Labs that created Bored Apes. They now own that collection. So I don't think the purchase of a CryptoPunk now means the same thing as it might have done, even 6 months ago. But again, I'm talking from the perspective of people who are so close to it that all of the intricacies of who owns what is actually in your mind, versus like LVMH owns dozens of luxury brands, and a consumer of one of those brands might never identify with another 20 of their brands, right? So like these are like culture holding companies. And honestly, it's mind blowing to think about the level of strategic thinking that's gone into this. And it's not coming from a team that has this experience, at least the way it's been positioned, right? It's like, these guys are creative, they're writers, like they saw CryptoPunks, they were inspired by it, we're going to do another one. And now it's like brand conglomerate decisions and like buying up IP and assigning it in different ways. It kind of hits the reset button a little bit, and then like the test becomes, maybe it just becomes about taste. And I think what galvanized the Bored Ape community so quickly was, for the most part, it created a bunch of wealth for people that previously were not wealthy in a way that I'm not sure CryptoPunks did the same thing. I think CryptoPunks were bought up in 2017 by like crypto OGs, people who have been native and interested in the space, and their crypto assets appreciated at the same rate as their NFTs, if not more, right? So the amount of sentimentality and like emotion you have attached to that thing, there's some because of the nature of like, I was first to the movement, but there's people who will, and like the Bored Apes have like a interesting reputation in both directions, right? It's like you can be super sensitive about it and like a little bit thin-skinned because you have 90% of your net worth tied up in this thing that to most of the outside world is the most ridiculous thing in the world, right? So they have a little bit of a reputation of being like, a little bit reactive and like, but it galvanized community, whatever, in whatever definition you want to give that. But the fact that people are extremely financially and emotionally invested for a number of reasons. And I don't think there's a few other examples of different like communities people have joined that have done that, but none to the extent that the Bored Ape effect has had, right? So I think that it makes it defensible, but it also gives it like a vector for attack as well. If your success is so contingent upon culture, then like there's plenty of fashion brands that have had their like moment in the sun and then kind of tailed off. So now it becomes about executing over time. It's really interesting to think about like how long an aesthetic can remain relevant too. Like the style of certain things my thesis that I gave on this podcast before was CryptoPunks have like there's some timelessness to it because it's so simple and so like evocative of like pixel art that it could have been designed in 1981 or tomorrow, right? Versus Bored Apes definitely feel like moment in time, like around this era. So we'll see how that plays out, but it kind of scrubs some of the rules and assumptions.
You're saying is Bored Ape could be the Ed Hardy of NFTs. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
It's pretty funny though.
Someone's getting fits right now.
I used to rock Ed Hardy, bro.
All of us did. I'm sure. Jack, I'm sure you had a few of those graphic.
What's the guy's name?
Man, I could never pull off an Ed Hardy.
What's the guy's name? The designer, Christian Agardier.
I forgot his name, but
I don't know. But what's the other Ed Hardy thing? Because I think that was part of the Kazoma thread too. Von Dutch. Yeah.
I definitely sold a few Von Dutch bags back in
Bling Bling King.
baby pink, baby blue era. Yeah.
Wait, hold on a second. So Jack, I think I want to emphasize this point. And I think it's major. Taking away the trump card of this is the oldest collection, that's huge, right? Like that must be an earthquake. Because it means that anything in the future could take out. If you have a better strategy, if you have a better go-to-market, if you have more cultural weight, and it's like you said, this is now turning into the fashion world in the sense of like, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think like people just use whatever it is they need to use to rationalize their allocation to this stuff, right? Like in the same thing in the art world, like the most valuable art in the world, you don't just say, how old is it?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of old shit that's worthless. Right. And then Jeff Koons is selling this thing that's made in a factory for 9 figures because he's a marketer and he knows how to tell a story and get it in the right place. So everyone's looking at it. And I think that is like, we've talked about this at length. The attention, your ability to command attention is far more of that's far more of a measure of how successful you're going to be in this world, how much more relevant you're going to be. And every single like layer of society being organized in this direction, going digital, etc., is as soon as you erase like the signal that everybody thought this thing was giving off, as soon as you change that, it's like we talk about key man risk and key meme risk and all of these ideas of like, as soon as 51% of people believe this thing represents X, then you might not want to be associated with X anymore, depending on who you are. And I think that's like true in everything. Anybody that's like die hard affixed to a single asset or a single idea, like with exception of the people who are building that thing, it's a riskier place to be, right? You don't control the variables, culture changes around you. And, and like you said, the fact that you've witnessed this happen once is probably setting precedent for the fact that it could happen again. And who knows, could be in 10 years, could be in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Dude, love it.
I was going to ask a question for you guys, and maybe Trung, you might have another example that you mentioned from earlier. Like, as Jack mentioned, applying this to the traditional business world or startup world, like this power move of saying, like, there's me and one other big player, let me just go buy them out. Right, and especially being the newer player, are there any other examples that come to mind of people who have done this successfully?
Outside of Web3, you mean? Yeah.
Just whether it's I'm thinking like DoorDash, Uber, like that style. That happens all the time. They're all playing in a particular market, and they're like, let's go grab the second player or the first player in this case, I guess.
Yeah, I think maybe this is completely off of a comparison, but like buying features for like big technology firms, like didn't Apple buy Shazam? Just looking that up this week. Like just accents to the thing that you're already building. There's actually a pull quote I should have called out at the beginning of this from the co-founders of Lava Labs.
Okay.
They said, Yuga Labs are the innovators of the modern profile picture project and the best in the world at operating these projects. They are the ideal stewards of the CryptoPunks and Meebits. In their hands, we are confident that they will continue to be vital, thriving projects in the emerging decentralized web. That's kind of your standard, like, you know, this is going to be great for everybody.
Jack's gone corporate. Sell bro. Sell everything.
Yeah, that's one argument, or it's like the opposite argument, right? It's gone corporate. It's like being stewarded by people who have a lot more to lose, and it has like ridiculous amount of capital behind it. As an investment, maybe it gets more robust, but as like a signaling of like the decentralized web and like, you know, being a cypherpunk and like keeping your private keys under your kettlebell and all that stuff, it's kind of a counter signal to that now.
But can I ask a question for you guys as well, your opinion on this? Because I think you brought up a great point there, Jack, about time, like, you know, a moment in time, like being the oldest version of something is only one variable, right? Like, it's still a variable, right? Like a Rolex being around for X decades or however long it's been around, there's a certain lindiness to that, as you mentioned. So if you've managed to stay around for that long, that is a positive signal if you can maintain the other variables, right? Which is going to sound like an old man here, but the coolness factor or the relevancy of, you know, you're still innovating, whatever you want to say. But to me, again, just trying to be objective here, a lot of Web3 stuff is about pushing things forward and the progressiveness of things, creating a new thing that is better than the last thing. And it's, I'm not sure if I've got a conclusion on this, but curious to hear your guys' take on how much of a factor will it be longer term, because isn't it always going to be we've got a new thing and that can be that can replace the old thing, versus, you know, this old story that might work in traditional, you know, companies like LVMH, right? Like, I think that's a great comparison. Even if you think something in the middle, like media, like a traditional media company, there's longevity and lindiness to, you know, cartoon characters or something like that, but they create new ones as well, or they create new versions of it. Even if you think of like Batman we spoke about, or Spider-Man, like they're still using the same character, but they've adapted it and evolved. So the question is, will something like a Bored Ape be able to
continue
that can be evolved on, which maybe it can?
I think we discussed this before, where it's like it's niche, right? Like Disney is so ridiculously well done, you know, like Walt Disney, and the way that stuff was created is like a 2-year-old. I think we've said this is basically the exact same thing before. It's like a 2-year-old can watch a like Daffy Duck or a Donald Duck cartoon, and an 80-year-old can watch it and they're like, oh yeah, that's, you know, there's something in there for everyone. But I think the opposite, this is clearly a luxury brand, right? A niche brand. And I think that's like becomes the challenge in how you deploy it as well. There's like the market for this is like the psychographic profile is pretty like similar generationally, and like you've seen it by even the artists that they've gone after as sponsors, like Snoop Dogg, Eminem. It's like late 20s, early 30s dudes who grew up in the 90s basically that are interested in this stuff, and they have like a lot of them have disposable income at this point in their lives. And I think the one thing you see on Twitter, or the one thing that I would love to know more about in like culture more broadly than Twitter, is like a lot of people just look at that and they're like, what is that thing? You know, like there's not the same just like gravity in the way that they've been designed or the way that they're recognized as like Disney characters are, for example, right? It's a much more niche execution. So I think that's like, is there a natural cap on how far it can resonate, and how, like, in what direction do they have to evolve the narrative to expand the market?
And I guess the counterpoint is that I agree with you, but I think the counterpoint would be Disney's been around forever, and it's it takes time to get in front of billions of people. And right, especially when something's new, you know, the whole world is like, most people are like, what the hell is NFT and why are you spending your money on that? But maybe in 10 years time, once it's been in multiple iterations of stuff that people are used to or get used to, maybe that would change. I guess that's the bull case for it.
Well, I think you know what is what you just said made me think of is that's the approach they're taking, right? It's like they're buying up other IP and other collections, and they're going to have like this centralized ability to market, this concentrated power, capital, network, distribution, and they can be a Disney in the same way that doesn't Disney own, like, I don't know, it owns the most obscure shit. Like you think of Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, but they've also got these like hyper niche, whether it's characters or franchises or businesses. Yuga Labs is the Disney, not Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? Like it's a level above what we're talking about here. So
Yuga's going to turn into, I see what you're saying. They are, like you said, they are a steward of IP. This is what this move really means.
Yes.
Yuga, right? And I think an important point also is, since they took venture funding, you know, you have to do these moves to justify.
Well, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if it's true that they got the deal. I know they were talking about it, or did you see it confirmed?
No, did Yuga not raise money?
They definitely, there was a rumor that they're talking to Andreessen, but I didn't see.
Let's confirm it. Yuga Labs VC funding. Yeah, I don't want to be wrong.
I thought they had as well, but that was just based on people writing about it, so I haven't actually.
I think you're right. Might be in talks.
Just a rumor. Okay,
so this was Bored Ape creator in funding talks with Andreessen at $5 billion. This is early Feb. So I'm not seeing. Okay, it looks like they want a $5 billion valuation. Nothing's been confirmed. That's a great point.
But you know what? I don't know how it works or how, like, who is supposed to disclose when. Like, these are private businesses, right? So that maybe something's already happened. Is that fair? Just assume. That's a
good point.
No, it could. No, 100%, right? But this move seems consistent with something like, I mean, you mentioned they'd have, like, somebody comes in and is like, here, we're giving you a war chest. If you were to build the Disney of NFTs or in Web3, like, what would you do? It's like, well, we buy CryptoPunks. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out that this deal has been done, and there were some like expert negotiators and deal structurers involved in making this happen. This is not just the characters that came up with the collection, right? It's like there's a lot of very what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
they're building this world. It's very, very strategic. It's very deliberate what's going on here, right?
It's I think that there's partners that have grown, scaled, built beastie businesses involved in facilitating a transaction like this, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Bilal, I wanted to answer your question of when's the last time like a up-and-comer acquired like an OG? So this is not. I don't want to compare this at all to say that this is the outcome that's going to happen with Yuga and crypto, and CryptoPunks. But it did remind me, your question, of when AOL acquired Time Warner at the peak of the .com. And I'm not suggesting this is what's going to happen, that the whole thing's going to flame out, but it is that energy of new up and comer, taking out the old guard. But this happened so fast, right? Like, we're talking like a 5-year time frame since CryptoPunks started until this deal happened. Time Warner's been around for decades before AOL acquired it. At the time, the largest deal ever. I think it's $180 billion merger. Complete disaster. It's like we have to do a front seat fan on the AOL Time Warner merger.
Yeah. No, that's a good comparison. I like that.
One more item for the Yuga Lab discussion is they late last year announced that they were going to be launching a token. So, and they said Q1. And I think, if I'm not wrong, May 8th was floated, or April 3rd, one of the dates that's associated with the beginning of the project. And last week, there was this big blow up on Twitter because they were asking people to for their social security numbers and like addresses and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so the speculation is that they're registering as a security and they needed to gather all this information. And if they're going to distribute equity to, all these different characters, then you need to know something about them. And they're obviously, again, sophisticated operators and legal partners and whatever else is going on behind the scenes.
Nostradamus Butcher over here.
Yo, man, hey, has he missed? Has Butcher missed?
Not really.
Has not really missed. Have I made any money from Butcher's prognostications? Zero. I made $0.
Well, if you haven't made negative, then you're doing all right.
You're doing great,
I made negative. I made negative. No, Jack.
No, that's a great point, Jack. I didn't even think of the KYC story that we might have shared in the group chat, but we didn't talk about today. All right. Anything else on that before we move on to Roman Abramovich? Really good. That was a good deep.
That was great, man. That was a little bit of everything. A little bit of historical context, business strategy. This is why people come to NIA, right? Like, we're just gonna give you a little bit of everything. We're like a gumbo. We're a delicious gumbo. It just gets better with time. Man, you ever made like a gumbo type dish and then you try it the next day? It's always better
delicious,
the next day.
A chili, like a chili.
Yeah, you gotta let the flavors, right? The flavors come together.
Let the flavors.
This clip, you want to take that clip out and put it right at the beginning of the video, right?
Yeah.
That's the
gumbo
cut clip.
Of podcast. All right, talking of gumbo, let's move on to Roman Abramovich. Okay, where do we start here? Okay, so
let me tee it up for Bilal.
Go on, Trung.
Okay, NIA listeners. Excuse me. I just coughed. I got so excited. You may not know, but Bilal Bling Bling King Zaidi is a massive fan of Chelsea Football Club.
No, I'm not Chelsea, not Chelsea. Don't insult me. Well, actually, talked about Bling Bling King. The history is my other thing that I ran at the same time was something called Arsenal Review. It was a big Arsenal website. So I used to write about Arsenal almost every day for many years.
So what's the relationship to you? Okay, Arsenal is your favorite football club.
Yeah.
Does that mean Chelsea is your enemy for life? Are they the crosstown rival?
Yeah, well, so the story is Chelsea have become, unfortunately, the more successful club in recent times.
Okay.
Right, in the last 20 years, which has been funded by Mr. Roman Abramovich, right? So the
Russian oligarch.
The Russian oligarch. The high-level story is Roman Abramovich came into English football and kind of revolutionized football across the world because he brought in a bunch of money, and that model has now been replicated by lots of other people. He essentially bought a lot of their success, which I'm not saying that in like a derogatory way or something, but before that, for 50 years, they hadn't really won anything.
Okay.
And now, 20 years later, they just won the Champions League last year, which is, the really big competition that's like winning the World Cup for club football. And they've objectively been a really successful club in the last 20 years. And a lot of that has been funded by what a lot of people knew. He came from Russia and he was like this Russian oligarch. But because of what's happening in Russia in the war right now, he's just been sanctioned by the UK government. And what that means is essentially his assets are frozen. And one of his biggest assets is Chelsea Football Club. So
can you tell the listeners what Chelsea can do now before Bilal gets into the history of Roman Abramovich, because he's about to drop some knowledge. Can you explain to the listeners, what is Chelsea allowed to do as a football club? What is it not allowed to do today?
I think right now they've been given a temporary license to keep operating, essentially, but they're not allowed to take in new money. So it's like their bank accounts have been frozen, essentially, is my understanding. So they can't sell merchandise. Like they're not able to spend a certain amount on travel, for example. They can't sell tickets to their game. They've already pre-sold tickets. So if you've bought a season ticket or you've already paid for tickets, you can still go, but they're not allowed to sell new tickets. And so that doesn't really matter too much because a lot of their tickets are kind of pre-sold, but it's more the principle of the club is in limbo, at least for a few weeks while things are being figured out if they're going to be able to sell. But if we back up a little bit, before he got sanctioned, basically 1 or 2 weeks before, Roman Abramovich came out and proactively said, I'm going to sell Chelsea. Right, and that was already quite a big deal because, he's got more money than God. He can basically do anything he wants. He's been making a loss for many years with Chelsea.
What's his net worth, to your understanding?
I know I think it was like 15 billion or something like that. Maybe a little bit more. So it's a crazy amount of money. But what has happened is, in that time, he also said, I will sell Chelsea, and the net proceeds, which is key, net proceeds, I will give to victims of the war. Again, another kind of broad statement. Victims of war could also be Russian people who are also kind of, being impacted by the war. Net proceeds is a cheeky way of saying, what does net proceeds mean?
The word net, let me tell the listeners, the word net
CFA Trump
is when you hear the word net, red flags everywhere. In Hollywood specifically, I'll give you an example. This is more germane to Hollywood, but there's a term called Hollywood accounting. And this is why when you hear movie stars negotiate deals, you always hear Tom Cruise gets 5% of gross box office. The reason it's gross is because he does not want the accountants hitting that net line, because they'll put marketing expense, 50% of budget, travel expense, 10% of budget. By the time you get down to net, nothing. There's zero. Eddie Murphy, a famous comedian and movie star, called the net profit monkey points. He's like, I don't want none of the monkey points, because he knows that when it gets to the bottom, there's no money left. So to Bilal's point, the net proceeds, questionable. But Bilal, I've already derailed this enough.
No, that's
Can
right.
you start from the beginning of Roman Abramovich's story and hit us?
And while you said that, I did look up his net worth is close to what I said, 13 billion. On paper. Obviously, 3 billion of that is Chelsea, which is he's probably not going to get anything out of that. So let's just back up a little bit. So I mentioned in recent times, he said he's going to sell the club, net proceeds, etc. That was him getting ahead of it. And when I saw that was already kind of unprecedented in the football world, right? No one's had to do that before. And then like a week or two later, he's been sanctioned and all this stuff has kicked off. But if you back up a little bit, the bigger story is like where his wealth was made, right? And that's kind of what's being criticized. Now, the truth is, most people have already been criticizing him for a long time as fans. People call Chelsea Chelsea, and they will say like, okay, you've got an oligarch who's bought you out and funded you. Again, to be objective, this almost happened to Arsenal. There's a guy called Usmanov who almost bought Arsenal, and he's another Russian oligarch who got his yacht seized recently. He was in the news. And so I'm being objective here that if it happened to me...
Who owns Arsenal right now?
Arsenal is owned by the Glazers. Not Glazers, sorry. The guy that just won with the Rams. Who's the owner of the Rams? Kroenke, exactly. Stan Kroenke, exactly.
Yeah. Who is married, by the way, to a scion of the Walmart family.
Exactly. Yeah. So that we have a nice, clean, like business owner, billionaire, right? Like, again, air quotes clean. We don't know exactly. So that's kind of the bigger point that's coming, which is where's the line? What's clean, right? So to get back to Roman Abramovich, first of all, he came into the UK with this thing called a golden visa. Have you heard of that before?
You buy your way into a country,
basically,
right?
Yeah. And the UK, and I don't know if Vancouver's got something like this, but essentially the reason so many Russian and Chinese and Saudi people come to the UK and buy up crazy real estate is because there's this thing called the golden visa, and essentially it means it's a golden ticket. If you've got enough money, they don't ask that many questions where your money's come from, right? So that's now being pulled into question, and people are saying, well, we've been doing that in wider society, not just with football, and this idea of sports washing, because what that means is if you've got a bad rep, you've done something wrong, you can come here and buy a football club, and now everyone thinks, oh, that's cool. You've got a football club. It looks all glamorous. You've won football trophies for us. Like, people kind of just forgive you. But when you go back, last night I watched a BBC Panorama documentary that they just released 1 or 2 days ago on this. So again, this is not me digging up stuff on him, so no one's knocking on my door. This is based on the Panorama documentary. There's a few key things. 1992, he's alleged to have basically stolen diesel from a train and rerouted it and sold it off. So it's when he's 25 years old. There's records of him basically going to court and having to defend. So this is like early
Allegedly.
And he was also apparently kind of grew up poor. I think he was an orphan or something like that. So this is in 90s Russia, the Wild West. after, the USSR,
the fall of the Soviet
Union was falling, things were becoming privatized. And that is the birth of a lot of these oligarchs, right? Like people were basically buying for pennies on the dollar. And so 1992 that happened. Then 1995 is where he really made a lot of his wealth. And the kind of summary is a lot of the oil companies of the country were being put together to be privatized. And himself and his partner, Boris, we'll call him Boris, is... They basically bought an asset that was potentially worth billions for about $200 million or around that price. And there's a whole backstory to that, but the summary is apparently, again, allegedly, they paid off an official with $10 million. Again, there's records of this in some court hearing, because later Boris, I think, sued him for $6 billion.
Yeah.
So during this court case, they brought up a lot of these things. So he's kind of talked about it before, but it's kind of flown under the radar. And the conclusion to that is they bought it for 200 and then eventually sold it for $12 billion 10 years later. Right? So 200 million to 12 billion. That is where he made most of his wealth. And then since then, he's basically been buying assets. He also served under... with Putin, he was, I think, in the government or something for 8 years. And that is where the ties to Putin have come. The summary on Putin is that he, again, allegedly is the front man, the businessman, the money man for Putin. And he's even given
This is an allegation.
This is an allegation that,
okay.
Again, in the Panorama documentary they talked about. And they said that he's even, apparently gifted a $50 million yacht to Putin,
okay.
right? So this, we all know what gifted means, same way with Hollywood accounting. So that is kind of like the summary of the allegations, a lot of the allegations from the past. To summarize, the knockdown price they bought it for. The big thing here, though, is that it was also apparently funded by the government, right? So not only did they get an asset for a few $100 million when it should have been a few billion, he didn't even use his own money. It was a loan from the government, and this is something called loans for shares.
I can walk through this if you want.
Trung, you've been looking into this. So what is loans for shares?
Okay, so you mentioned that he made a lot of his money in 1995. So I'll give you the historical context behind that. So this loans for shares scheme was basically, it's 1995. It's 4 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Russian government is under Boris Yeltsin. So what's happening is a democracy now, ostensibly, it is a democracy. They're running elections. Going into the 1996 Russian election, there's a lot of fear in the country that the Communist Party is going to win the election. So you just had communism fall and the Soviet Union fall, and now they might come back into power in Russia. So Boris Yeltsin had two purposes he needed money for. Number one is just to run the state. The state was already not run very well because it's coming out of 70 or 60, 69 years. That's a joke. 69 years of the Soviet Union. Nice. The government wasn't running very well. And then he also needed money to run the election, right? So how is the government going to raise money? The tax system is in shambles. But Bilal alluded to, they have all these assets. Because as we're finding in the last couple of weeks, Russia is a natural resource monster. Last week, we talked about commodities. They own 10% of the world's oil, like 10% of natural gas, 10% of all these important precious metals. So the government has these state-owned assets, particularly the oil and gas industry. So they sold, the loan for shares situation goes exactly like this. Commercial banks would lend buyers, like people like Roman Abramovich, this whole class of individuals that turn into oligarchs. They're all politically connected. They were lent money and to buy these assets from the government. So now the government receives the money, right? And in exchange for the government receiving the money, it was a loan. They put up collateral in these companies. So some banks, like take one oil company, for example, it was $10 million a loan, and you got 40% of the oil company as collateral. And if the government didn't pay that back in a year's time, that converts into equity into the oil company. So that's how you buy something at a cut down rate, is completely what Bilal said, right?
No, that's a great way to put it. And then Trung, just to add to that, so you can argue that could be a really great way to do it if it was done correctly, without corruption.
100%.
And the criticism is that on top of this, there were a lot of like auctions at that time, right?
Exactly. And the auctions were restricted who could do them, right?
Exactly. So they weren't real auctions. They were fixed.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. There's a crazy story. So these 12 assets that were sold, like a very extreme example of how they fixed one of these auctions was the auction was held in like Eastern Siberia. And to auction for the asset, you had to physically be there. So you don't want to know what they did at the airport in that air. They shut down the airport. So no planes could arrive and no one could bid on the auction except for the individuals that were pre-selected.
Yeah.
The other sketchy thing that happened was the loan was made but the auctions themselves would only happen after the election. So that means everybody was incentivized to make sure that Yeltsin won. Right? Because they wanted Boris Yeltsin to stay in place because he was versus the communist regime and the Communist Party, a much more friendly, quote unquote, to business. But I'll actually tell you a couple interesting things that happened. So the reputation, as Bilal alluded to, was that this time, 95, 96, created these oligarchs, these Russian oligarchs. But I read a really interesting academic paper about this particular loans for shares scheme. So it was sketchy, it was rigged, but it actually wasn't as big of a in terms of the entire economy as it's held up to be now. Like if you mention loans for shares, everybody says, oh, that's why the Russian economy is a disaster. And like, that's why it's run by oligarchs. But a couple of interesting things from this article came out is like the entire assets that were sold, so these 12 companies, is about $2 billion. That's only 10% of the Russian stock market at the time. And just as an example, Gazprom, the gas giant that has been feeding gas to Europe for these past decades, they sold $2 billion worth or gave away $2 billion worth of Gazprom in vouchers to the citizens. So like in terms of how large this privatization was, it wasn't as big as perception has it now. But then the question is, why has it held this perception that loans for shares is the reason why oligarchs exist?
But then isn't it also trunk that they eventually, like 10 years later, they sold for way more than that, right?
Yeah. So there's two parts to that.
Maybe they did. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll explain that. No, that's a huge part. So they sold later, right? So the value increased 10 times. It's because the Russian economy exploded. Gas, natural resource prices went up. So like in mid 2000s, when gas, especially oil, was on the rise, it's like all these assets, like you said now, are worth so much. And so the misperception, according to this paper, is that analysts looked at how much like Exxon or Chevron or Shell was getting per barrel, and they're like, man, like the Russian government really undersold this asset versus what an Exxon would have gotten. But what they're not taking into consideration is the fact that there's geopolitical risk, right? It's like, would you rather own Exxon or a Russian oil company in 1995, right? That's going to be a massive discount. And then also you have to remember between the loans for share deal and then 2005, when Abromovich sold for 12 billion, the Russian economy completely collapsed. The Russian economy completely collapsed in 1998 and they defaulted on their debt. And you remember, an individual investor like you or me or our parents could have bought the same assets that Roman Abramovich did and then 100x'd. But then you would have had to stomach those 2-3 years when the economy went to basically zero. You know what I mean? So like on like a risk adjusted basis, it wasn't like as criminal as it sounds. The criminality was like the rigging of the auctions themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a really fair point. I'm sure in those 10 years, they added value. I'm sure they grew it legitimately as well. But I think there's just so many examples of it seems to be corruption.
Right.
The last one I'll mention, which is also from the Panorama documentary, was the kidnapping of a Chinese representative. So there was a company called CNPC who were basically bidding in an auction with one of these Roman Abramovich's companies. It might have actually been not the oil this time. It might have been like aluminium or something like that.
Right, metal.
But essentially, this dude turns up to Moscow and just gets kidnapped, doesn't turn up at the auction, and eventually gets released once they had withdrawn. Again, this is allegedly, who knows if this is true, but this was on BBC. They're not like some random dude on YouTube just making stuff up.
Like us.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not us. They're definitely not us. So, but yeah, the kind of summary is there's a lot of corruption, alleged corruption.
Totally.
I'm sure he did grow some things. I'm sure he's built like real skills in that time, and he's added some legitimate value. But I think the premise is that they basically cheated a lot of
totally
people,
to own the assets to begin with.
Exactly, and especially the taxpayers, essentially, like they were the ones who kind of like lost out here, and so that's kind of the history part, right? But now let's look forward. Like the most important thing is now, like what's happening right now, and what's going to be the impact beyond. There's one part is Chelsea, and the second is the global sports world, right? It's not just like this is the biggest sport in the world, and the Premier League is the biggest league in football, right? So the question is, where is the line? And I guess I'd throw it to you guys, like looking at other reference points of US sports and other stuff we've seen in the past. Like, what is a fair way to do this? Because someone who supports Chelsea and is kind of on his side might say this is like quite unfair for a regular fan of Chelsea or the players or the staff who work there. And even me, I can say like, if some random guy or girl who works in Chelsea Stadium is now not going to get paid because of something, that's not a good thing, right? Like no one wants those people to be worse off. But the question is, should this have been there in the first place, right? Like this is not just about football. The golden visa system, us turning a blind eye as, British government and the West essentially, and all of a sudden getting a conscience when it's convenient, is what's happening right now. And especially in football, I mean, Newcastle just got bought by basically the Saudis, right? And the manager of Newcastle, Eddie Howe, was just asked a few days ago in a press conference, what do you think about the 81 people who were just executed in Saudi Arabia?
What did he say?
And he basically said, like, I'm a football manager. I can like talk about football.
That's so true, man.
Now, what's going to happen is Pep Guardiola gonna be asked for Man City soon because they're owned by Abu Dhabi, I think, and PSG is owned by the Qataris. And there's lots of examples of
because they all have human rights issues, right?
Exactly.
It's such a great point.
Yeah, and that's the kind of wider discussion. We're not going to solve it today on this call, but. Where is the line?
Bilal, don't discount us. We might figure it out.
We're getting pretty close, man. Like
I know. I think we're about to solve world peace here. But yeah, I think for me the line is, there's no checks and balances right now, really. Right? Like they just said, oh, we're buying a club for X amount of money. Here's a bunch of money. Everyone turns a blind eye. And then the truth is, the football world has got its own corruption problems. FIFA has had its own, problems around this. The World Cup that is
the
coming
Olympics. It's all everything is corrupt around. You bring such good points. Like this is not just about football, right? You made the broad points about sports washing. Like Mikhail Prokhorov, another oligarch, owned the Brooklyn Nets, right? It's like the basketball, and then now the Brooklyn Nets are owned by Joe Tsai, the co-founder of Alibaba, right? He made billions of dollars coming up in the Chinese Communist era in the early 2000s, and then more recently, and we saw what happened with Jack Ma, with the Chinese government clamping down on him. It's like these assets they're just whatever. There's 1,000 people that can own these assets that we talk about, these sports leagues, and it's like behind the quote is like behind every great fortune is a great crime. Is like there's just some truth to that, right? And I had no idea about the Newcastle situation, but I think that's such a salient example. Is like if you right now are a football fan in Europe and you're making fun of Chelsea, it's like you should probably look at your owner too, right? It's like who's the owner of your club? And then the Newcastle situation is so interesting. It's like now Saudis are like they're not particularly the nicest people in the world, right? The Saudi government. Yeah.
And so I guess the question is we don't really have a resolution here, but the one thing I will say that the US sports, some of them, and I'm not an expert in this, but there's a sense of financial fair play. So in the football world, we do have financial fair play in air quotes, but all the leagues are dominated by the richest clubs. And it's not like the NBA where you have like a salary cap. There's a salary cap in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's not a salary cap the same way you have in the NBA. There's not like a draft where like the bottom teams get better picks the next year and stuff like that. And you know, I'm not saying we need to like Americanize the football world necessarily, but we need to have a better, more equal footing, because right now it just has been, if a rich person comes and buys your club, you over several years you're gonna kind of buy success, and like for a club like Arsenal, you know, Arsenal has been kind of like the opposite model. We've obviously got a billionaire who owns us, but they've been trying to create a self-sustainable model, generally speaking. They upgraded the stadium 15 years ago. They bought cheaper players and then sold them for more. Like, there's a few examples of clubs who do that. Arsenal, Dortmund, Liverpool even, you can argue, have seen success through kind of quite smart business behavior. Again, I don't know all the details. Maybe someone's going to say in the comments, like, actually it's owned by this person and they've done XYZ. Now, like, the bigger question is this idea of morality in sports, right? Like, where is the line? Because, you know, we can literally make an argument against every single owner, like you said. And so I don't know what the answer is to this, but we wanted to cover it because it's obviously pressing topic with Roman Abramovich. Anything else from you guys? Any other thoughts on that?
I had one quick thought on why the perception of oligarchs around loan for shares persisted. It actually benefited everyone at that time to make people believe that these oligarchs were responsible for owning all this economy by these means, right? Even though I just mentioned loans for share only accounted for maybe 10% of the economy. That's not nothing, but it's not 100%. If you think about it, it benefits everyone. It's like, if you are the government, it makes it sound like, oh, they're privatizing quickly, right? Like, if you are a foreign investor, come. Like, we will play ball, money talks. There's that perception. The oligarchs obviously want to keep that myth going, right? For the same reason. It's like, yeah, we own the entire economy. Like, obviously that's come back to bite them 25 years later, but at the time, you're gathering power. And then the opposition party to Yeltsin and his government, they're the same, right? They're like, listen, look, they just gave away the entire economy. So like, everybody at that time was incentivized to be like, yeah, loans for share was giving away the entire economy for nothing, right? It's kind of twisted, but it makes sense. That was my only point on that. And I had a question for Bilal was, what is everything we said about don't question, I mean, look at your own ownership. What are you reading through the grapevines? Two questions. Number one, who do they think Chelsea's going to sell to? What are you seeing? And can you tell us some of the internet fights that you're reading about? Have you seen anything online? There was this good internet beefs going on. Like, I love hearing about these different worlds that I'm not involved in. All right, first question: who's buying Chelsea?
Who's buying? I'm not sure. I think there's people putting in bids right now. Okay. There was, interestingly, Conor McGregor had posted, even if it's just for press, it said he'd texted probably his business partner or some rich person he's friends with and said, like, they're up for sale, maybe we should buy them. So that would actually be quite a fun, interesting one if something like that could come off. I know there was actually talk of another Saudi group, which was like I think a media group or something like that, who had been talked about buying them, which obviously brings its own questions. And I think whoever buys them now can't be someone who's...
You got to be clean as a whistle, man.
Exactly.
You got to be... It's got to be Yuga Labs. Yuga Labs has to buy...
Yuga Labs buys Chelsea, yeah. And the good thing is for a lot of the competitors like Arsenal, Liverpool, etc., is to say, all right, this is one of the dominant teams who now hopefully won't be able to play kind of on an unfair, playing field, right? Like, they've been okay to take a loss up to the max, basically, that you're allowed, because he's willing to take a loss because it doesn't make a difference to him. And I don't know who the owner's going to be, but those are the few that have been kind of floated around so far. And to answer your question on fights, I mean, less so the fights, but more the memes. The memes have been insane. I mean, like,
Dude, you said one.
There's pictures of there's pictures of like the players
flying on Ryanair,
or one of the players doing like a group dinner, and it's like looks really terrible. So, the kind of serious point is, I mean, look, if from a football point of view, if you're a player right now, do you want the smoke? Do you want to be there at Chelsea, or do you want to be somewhere else? Like, if you're someone who's about to sign, like I think Haaland has been talked about, who's one of the best, strikers in the world right now. like there's talk about him going there, but would you really want? It's going to deter people, right? Like that's the point. So I think it'll be interesting to see 6 to 12 months from now. My opinion is it'll probably end up selling to someone pretty clean-ish, right? And they'll probably still be a dominant player because they've already got such a big leg up.
Right.
But I think over a 10-year time frame, it's going to be difficult for them to do what they did because they're not going to be able to just take a huge loss. Like that's not able. Most teams can't do that. So that's kind of my prediction for it. Dude. Jack, anything from you, mate? I know you.
I was just going to come in with the left field Web3 madman take.
Let's do it.
So I was like, just as you guys were talking, I think like manufacturing community around these assets on the internet is very hard to do, right? But if you talk about sports, like irrational passion and investment and time, and like especially growing up somewhere like the UK, it's like, and in the States for different sports, right? It's like, it is truly part of people's identity, and they are like, they commit a significant amount of time, capital, energy over time to this thing in their life. And it's also very quantifiable. It's like your team either performs well and makes more money, they sign a player, they sell more merchandise, they get rights on this TV channel, they do blah, blah, blah. So, you know, over time, maybe it becomes more normal. And I'm not saying this is the tech stack is Web3 to make this happen, but fan ownership of a club at scale.
Right. Chelsea DAO.
Oh, there is a Chelsea DAO, right? There is one.
But I don't know what would it cost to buy Chelsea? Couple billion?
3 billion.
Couple billion? Yeah.
3 billion.
And then you got to manage it or just hire the coach.
Incredible.
But it's a bit
pull that off.
Yeah, like even a publicly traded club is kind of interesting, right? I don't know enough about private markets to know whether or not that is a concept, but there must be ownership in these things privately. They're just not liquid.
I think there are some there. I don't know the details now, but I know in the past there's been. You could buy. I'm pretty sure Man United. You could in the past buy stock in them, but now they're owned by the Glacier, so I'm not sure. How that works.
I mean, even like you think about all of the money that goes into sports betting. Like even if you siphoned off a percentage point and say you're going to get equity in every club you bet on from the pool of ownership, whatever tokens. There's actually a small experiment going on right now. There's a couple clubs I think that are being bought by crypto communities in the lower leagues in the UK. You have to read up on that and talk about it on another episode.
Yeah.
But talk about like bootstrapping community out of the box. There's very few things that do that like sport does. So I can see, you know, again, there's obviously transparency issues with source of funds and all of that stuff in that world as well. But it would be great to start seeing clubs explore the idea of giving their fans back some ownership, some long-term upside in this thing that you spend your whole life supporting, because they all make, like, they're all businesses, right? They all kick off a certain amount of revenue to operate and, you know, pay the players they can afford to pay. So I think just those organizations were going to get more dynamic over time. We might not be at that point right now, but maybe we'll get there eventually.
Chelsea DAO, man. Yeah, I love that idea.
Chelsea NFTs. Every seat in the stadium goes off as an NFT.
I love this.
Fractional ownership.
Jack's
you get royalties on your seat if you own a season ticket as an NFT. I mean, there's so much to be done. So
many ways to skin it, for sure.
Yeah, it's just probably just not as profitable as, you know, just a straight up JPEG. So we're a ways out.
That's a good point. No, that's a great way to round it out. Trung, anything else from you before we move on to the most NIA Trung fan headline of all time?
Yeah.
AMC buys a gold mine.
I love that Jack came in with the Web3 angle. So Jack, what do you think, man? Who do you think's gonna own Chelsea? Well, actually, guys, I was thinking you could turn it onto a DAO and sell the sheets as NFTs. I'm like, Jesus, Jack, just answer the question.
Love it.
All of us is the answer, Trung. Everybody.
That's it.
We're gonna, it's the response to the inverse Soviet Union, mate.
Inverse Soviet Union. All right, love
Fair
it.
enough,
But yeah,
man.
so I'll just close that section out by saying, as much, I'm sure there's some Chelsea fans listening to this, and I wish you the best as a fellow football fan.
I wish you the best, also the worst.
And if they crumble all the way down to get relegated, I will not complain. So it's all good. All right, let's move on to the last one here. AMC buys a gold mine. Trung, what the hell is going on here, man?
Okay, so this is Tuesday, March 15th. This news hits the headline. So hopefully we can get this episode out tomorrow so it won't be old news, because you know with this meme stuff, the news cycle moves quickly. But I want to actually take this opportunity. I can talk about the deal for this gold mine, the AMC. Can you give me a screen share?
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about AMC CEO Adam Aron, who is ridiculous, as you can imagine. Hold on a second here. So we will do this. I'm just going to show a couple clips. There's a couple things we can laugh about. You guys see that? Hold on a second. Okay, there's the headline. So just an absolutely ludicrous headline, right?
Let's read it out for listeners.
Yeah. Movie theater chain AMC just bought a stake in a tiny gold miner with a shaky financial history.
That's an incredible headline. Jesus
what?
Christ.
These CNBC headline writers, like just that, right? That is amazing right there. But hold on a second.
Imagine trying to explain that 2 years ago. Like
I know, right? Well, this is the funny thing. A couple things we'll look at. Here's Adam Aron's tweet explaining why he purchased the asset. Hold on, let me how to get rid of screen share here. I can get rid of it. Stop share. So Adam Aron says AMC is playing on offense again with a bold diversification move. We just purchased 22% of Hycroft Mining in northern Nevada. It has 15 million ounces of gold and 600 million ounces of silver. So to summarize, AMC, the meme stock theater chain, just acquired a gold mine. So I actually saw a comment on Twitter which made me laugh really hard. Someone said, "What if this is like MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin?" I don't hate that, except Bitcoin's narrative versus gold. But Jack and Blau, I'm gonna show you guys something pretty funny here. So here's the tweet, and then check this out. What you have to understand about Adam Aron, the CEO, is this. He went to Harvard Business School and has a long career turning around corporations. Like this guy knows what he's doing, right? Like He is a seasoned executive. So check out these photos he has at the mine site. Just he's very 2022, right? But I'll actually give you a couple. Let me show you this one right here. So if you're thinking that Adam Aron is some noob that has no idea what he's doing, check out this guy's resume. So I cannot emphasize this enough. Adam Aron is an absolute hitter. Like this guy understands the public company narrative. So here's his resume. So 67-year-old Adam Aron, he has a BA from Harvard, this small community college in the Boston area. He has an MBA from Harvard Business School. Not a dummy. So he's worked in marketing at Hyatt and United Airlines. He was the CEO of Norwegian Cruises, the CEO of Vail Resorts, the CEO and part owner of the Philadelphia 76ers. And then before AMC, he was the CEO of Starwood Hotels. And he's the one that enacted a $12 billion merger while at Starwoods. I believe it was with Marriott. I think that it was with Marriott. So this dude is not a dummy at all.
Interesting.
Like a pretty fun life he's had, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, interesting that he started in marketing. Like
that was his,
like,
that was his thing. He's
at the beginning of his
marketer. Career. Exactly. Yeah. He started in marketing. And I mean, I got all this information from a Reddit profile of him. So you can imagine that the Redditors are not going to write it like a Wikipedia profile. In fact, I'm going to show you what the Redditors did during the height of the AMC meme stock craze last year. So this is what Reddit did to Wikipedia. They changed his profile to read, Adam Aron was named the Silverback King Kong CEO of AMC in late 2015, lauded for his transformation of AMC.
Also notable that it was before all of this, because I would have guessed that it was like way closer to that crazy run up than 2015.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. Like that's when he joined the craze, but so smart guy, and this Reddit post frequently refers to him as the Silverback King Kong of the jungle.
That's hilarious.
The ape, we ape together. This is a hilarious sequence. Jack, you mentioned the marketing part. So he worked for United Airlines and Hyatt in the marketing department. So this is how Reddit described his experience as a marketer for Hyatt and United Airlines. A silverback like Adam has no fear. He walks into uncharted territory and takes the territory, then makes it better, and then he bounces.
It's a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, exactly. So he, while at United, he created the concierge program there. So I know that you guys are flyers, and you know this custom concierge stuff. He did a lot of that similarly at AMC. He's trying to upgrade the levels of the different tickets you can buy, tiers. You get free popcorn if you own a share in the company. That's concierge stuff, right? Norwegian Cruise Lines, he turned that business around, according to Reddit. They ask, did $1 billion of debt and competition scare Adam? No, it did not. He did not paper hand the company. The silverback gangster pimp hustled 24/7, 365 to turn around Norwegian Cruise Lines. And then the last thing I'll mention is his selling of the deal with Starwood, Sheraton with Marriott. So they formed the largest hospitality company in the world. So this guy's a major hitter, right? So go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Trung, the characteristics of the like run up in the share price of AMC. It wasn't a short squeeze thing, or was it?
No, it was. It definitely got caught up in the meme situation. So here, we'll pull up the chart. So we'll tell you where the company's at right now. So you saw that it's a $7 billion company. It was once $30 billion. So you see it peak here in the summer of last year. Jack, you're right. It did catch kind of this crazy wave, but it was very akin to the meme stock craze. It was shorted. I don't know if it had the same short squeeze as GameStop did.
Because I just remember it being running in parallel with GameStop, and it was like the retro. We're kind of going back to the Eminem, Snoop Dogg, like 20 to 30 something idiot on the computer. Is behind all of this, right? Yeah,
no, exactly, right. It was like that whole movement. But what's interesting about Aron is, as we just established, this guy is platinum corporate America. So what he's done, though, is very smart. He's totally leaned into it, right? Like on earnings calls, he will say directly, he's like, we work for our shareholders, like as a wink and a nod to the Redditor crowd. And then, I don't know if you guys remember, but like very famous video last summer while he's hitting the circuit. So again, marketing genius, this guy. He's trying to pull like a mini Elon move. So he's on a YouTube interview.
Make sure that our long-term futures.
So for the listeners, he's in an interview. The camera moves and it shows he's not wearing pants. You guys remember that?
What a legend.
You guys remember that? So for the listeners,
I remember.
Yeah, the camera scans and he's not wearing pants. So this dude right there.
Oh, Jesus.
So he's on the Zoom call.
Look at the guy's face, the other guy's face.
Yeah. But afterwards, everybody's like, that was so manufactured. Like, because it hit the news headline like crazy. And this guy, and again, I got to emphasize, this guy is pulling the marketing moves, and he's pulling a lot of Elon type moves, right? So super smart guy, Harvard Business School. Let me show you. I went deep on this. It's not just him.
He's got his Kanye moves going.
Dude, looks like. Check this out. This is the AMC C-suite. So Adam Aron, Harvard Business School. Elizabeth Frank, Harvard Business School, their chief content officer. Sean Goodman, their CFO, where do you think he got his MBA? Harvard Business School. Last one, Stephen Colanera, their chief marketing officer, went to Wharton. So these guys are like very savvy about what they're doing, and they've done some very smart strategic moves. Like, I'll just wrap up this whole session by talking about what they did in the run-up to this gold mine situation. So last year, they sold $1.2 billion of AMC stock, right? So when your stock goes on a run-up like we just saw, what do? The best move is you raise money from the market, right? It's because you issue secondary shares because your stock price is worth so much. You take that money, you could pay down debt, invest in the business, or buy gold mines. So that looks like what they've done, right? They bought this gold mine, and I read you guys a rationale. Is like, he said that there's 15 million ounces of gold resources in this mine. I mean, like 6 months ago, this mine was about to go out of business. So I read some analyst reports about if this is a good move. Some are, I think our gut instinct is like, what is this company doing? Is like, they're taking like their valuable cash and quote unquote diversifying into natural resources. There's that angle.
Did you say how much it was?
20, they spent, I think $24 million for 22% of this company.
I think that frame around Michael Saylor buying Bitcoin is quite funny. Interesting, right? Because I mean, if you think what he's been saying, it's not that dissimilar to say. I mean, and gold has actually been running up, and there's a war going on, so it's pretty smart. It's quite smart.
Well, I'll tell you something funny about
to mine.
His justification for it. I mean, he says, our strategic investment is the result of having identified a company in an unrelated industry that appears just like AMC was last year. This is hilarious. It has a rock solid asset, but for a variety of reasons has faced immediate liquidity issues. So, I mean, the meme angle is really what's going on here, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. Like the amount of press that these guys are getting, us talking about it, like we're not CNBC, but like I think we're a good bellwether on what meme is working. And so to summarize everything, Adam Aaron is a beast in corporate America, and him and his team of Harvard Business School suits saw an opportunity to hop in there. I think there might be some insider dealing. I'm not 100% sure, not like insider trading, but they might be supporting somebody on this move with extra cash. There's some shenanigans around one of the other investors, Mudrick Hedge Funds, which had previously invested in AMC. They were a former investor in Highcroft, but I don't know. I don't know what the optics is, guys. We're talking about it, so I think they won. I think that's the takeaway. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was just gonna see whether or not there would be an ability for like the Reddit crowd to add additional momentum to this, but it's like a tiny private company, right? Like if they had stock in an asset that, I mean, the MicroStrategy Bitcoin thing is interesting. People buy MicroStrategy to get exposure to Bitcoin because they can't get exposure in that market. But this feels more like pure meme, you know?
You can go, you can right now get a gold ETF, right? GLD.
Yeah, pretty easy. Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty, the other parallel with Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy is like the product. I want to say admit defeat, and maybe like Saylor would say, I've listened to enough of him. He's like, our market share is not expanding at this point, right? Like the enterprise software that we've shipped keeps our business afloat. We do good trade, but we're not like, going to 100 million more businesses next year. Like we're in the maintenance stage of our business. And I think culturally AMC is probably at a similar spot, right? Like with all the way the world has changed in recent years, like people aren't queuing up to get back in the cinema. I'm not saying that's universally true, but it doesn't feel like that behavior is like going parabolic anytime soon, right? So it's just like, what else can we do? I don't think they can do anything legitimate in the streaming world, right? It's like that's not really the world they play in.
Yeah.
Where you got Netflix, Hulu, whatever else. There's no like immediate parallel that you think
Pass, bro. Remember movie
right
pass?
right
That was
you could just invent this like diabolically shocking economic model like the movie pass, right?
You mean
or,
$20 unlimited movie or whatever? $10?
Unreal, man. You could live in the cinema.
Let the market regulate itself. The market regulates itself.
Did you guys have movie pass? I had that. I
had it for a month or two.
Did you guys watch?
Crazy.
Did you watch Love?
I went all the time. It was amazing.
That's hilarious.
It was amazing for the consumer. It was amazing. I just didn't make any sense on the other side.
Guys, I have the Moses of finance journalism came down from on high. Matt Levine from Bloomberg, my ostensible colleague. This is an amazing excerpt, but this will be my last thought on it. I'm happy to hand it off to you guys after. He goes, AMC's core competency isn't gold mining, and it isn't running a movie theater either. Their core competency is using the meme stock mechanism to raise money and to buy and sell other businesses and to lend itself, like the meminess of itself, to other businesses. That's such a great point, right? It's like AMC is this cultural phenomenon that we've talked about for just from the beginning, this idea of memes. It's lending that meme a credence to other assets. So this is an interesting case of what it can pull off.
I like that.
You know what? You could reinvent the acronym. Maybe they could do that next. Like right now it's American Multi-Cinema, but it could be like American Meme Company.
Yeah.
You could reinvent it's like a holding company for memes.
They should, yeah. Like Yuga is. They're basically the Yuga.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they'll go that direction. And then I don't know, maybe there's some there's got to be some better applications for those physical locations too. It's just like this, I don't know, people go in there and watch TikTok for 2 hours.
Just go in there.
Yo, Jack, I gotta say, Jack's like like left field ideas are like pretty on point today.
Jack,
like, who's gonna buy Chelsea?
Next week he's become the chief creative officer of AMC.
Give me a ring.
Yeah. All right, boys. I think we're hitting time here.
That was great, guys.
Good summary. I will say we did want to talk about Kanye West documentary, which we won't get to today. But
we got a big guest for you guys next week. It'll be a great episode.
Oh no, we do have a big guest.
Yeah, we'll keep it on the DL. Just be sure to listen to next week. Anybody that's made
make
this
sure
far,
you're subscribed and locked in for next week. That's gonna be a good one. But I will say. That was a good chat, boys. I think we can wrap it up there. Anything else before we call it?
No, that was perfect, man.
Nah, everybody, thanks for listening. You know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like.
Well, I'm gonna be more explicit this time, guys. We're not seeing these 5 stars on Spotify hit as much, guys. Where are the reviews on Apple? Come on here, let's juke up these views on YouTube. No, I really appreciate y'all.
100%, man. All right, boys. So next week we got a good guest coming and. Lots going on. So and I'm back in New York now. You can see my tree back in the background. So feeling good to be back home, man. All right, and as always, thanks again for joining us. We will see you on the next one.
Yeah, peace out.
Peace.